Hi there, and welcome to today's spooky story for Halloween. This story today concerns this little fellow right here. You can see he was a little fellow. My daughter-in-law's finger was as big as his head. He weighed about 3 pounds, and he was about no bigger than, height-wise, than a 20-ounce Pepsi bottle. And when he was seated, he was no taller than a 24-ounce Pepsi bottle. And he weighed about 3 pounds. This is going to be important because it will play into why I thought what I thought at the time that it was going on, why I thought it was funny. But anyway, his name was Trigo. And this is also a very sad story because I think what happened the night that this, or the afternoon that this occurred back in 2011, October of 2011, is why he died 6 months later. I think that the house that we lived in back then was much more malevolent than the house we live in right now. And I think it had a hand in him dying. And I'll tell you about that at the end of the story. So one afternoon in October, I think it was around the 6th of October or so in 2011, I was up in the master suite that I've described for you before. You came in the main door, up a half a level was the master suite. In that master suite, if you were standing at the doorway, diagonal from the door was my 4-poster bed, and it was a big, monstrous 4-poster bed. Off to the left of that bed was the master bath. And in that space, this was in 2011, so we were still recovering from all of the really bad stuff that had happened in 2008 and 2009 and had continued on to 2011. And during that time, we had people living with us because they had lost their homes or they had lost their jobs or whatever had gone on during that time. So we had people living with us. And so during that time, right next to the door as you walked in, I had a pretty good sized refrigerator sitting there at the door. So if you were sitting at the top end of the 4-poster bed, you could not see out the door because of the refrigerator blocking it. But if you were at the bottom of the bed, you could see out the door. And that day, I was sitting at the top of the bed, so I could not see out the door. Trigo, my little poodle, was laying at the foot of the bed, and he was looking toward that door. Off to my right, because if I look to my right from where I was sitting at the head of the bed, was the bathroom that I talked about earlier. In there was my husband, Bradley. And I was sitting at the top of the bed, and I was probably on my phone or something. And I noticed that Trigo started to bark and growl. And I thought, that's kind of funny. Here's the part where it mattered. Because he's just a little 3-pound dog. What is he barking and growling at? And then my next thought was, maybe one of my kids was poking their head around the door and teasing him to make him bark and growl. So I called out and I said, knock it off, you kids. But he kept going. And finally, after a couple of minutes of that, I looked at Bradley and I said, can you come in here? And he was standing at the sinks right near me in the master bath. And I asked him if he would please come and find out why Trigo was barking and growling. And at that point, first of all, Bradley said yes, and he started walking toward me. As he passed between the refrigerator and one of the posters of the bed, Trigo stood up and started really slobbering and growling and acting like Cujo, only in a little 3-pound dog. And by that point, Bradley had crossed through that space and turned around and was looking at the door. And I said, can you see what he's growling at? And I looked at Bradley, and his jaw had hit the floor, and he was paler than the sheets on my bed. And he said, well, as best I can tell you, it looks like a troll just walked down our stairs. Later, he described him to me as looking kind of like Quasimodo. And so and the dog was just like incredibly crazy. I couldn't see any of it because of where I was seated, but the dog saw it and Bradley saw it. Now, 6 months later, this dog was nearly 6 at that point. This dog had a choking incident. And what's interesting about that is that before he died, I had a dream. And by the way, at the time of the dream, there was nothing wrong with the dog. We did not know that there was anything wrong. And what I dreamt was that he was going to die in 6 days. And that is exactly what happened. He died in 6 days of having choked on something that we didn't see him choke on. He had heart guard, basically, and it got stuck in his esophagus. And it took forever to figure out what was going on with him. And how we knew there was something wrong was it kept pressing, where it was stuck, it kept pressing on his little heart and stopping his heart. But we were able to get him back a couple of times, and he spent some time in the veterinary hospital. And they finally found the thing the 5th day, and they did surgery to remove it. And I thought, oh good, my dream is not going to come true. But unfortunately, they called me the next morning and told me that he had passed, that they couldn't get him back, they couldn't resuscitate him. And I was absolutely heartbroken because he was my soulmate, my soul dog. And I really think that that house, the malevolence of that house, had something to do with that incident, because why else would I have been given that dream 6 days before? Because that 6 days before dream was absolute torture. To know that 6 days before it happened was absolute torture. And I think that house and that troll or Quasimodo or whatever he was had something to do with it. I hope you enjoyed today's story. And if you did, please hit the plus button. I'm trying to get over 1,000 subscribers so that I can have lives and tell you some of this, because I have also a 17 plus year history of paranormal investigation, and I have a lot of stories from that as well. And hit the like button and follow me. Thank you very much.